What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2008 BMW E91 328xi. Today on the E91 behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your oxygen sensors. This DIY is going to be applicable to basically any N52 equipped BMW, as the process is going to be relatively the same. Just the space that you have to work with may change a little bit depending on what chassis you're working on, but the process still remains. In front of me, we have all four sensors. These are Bosch sensors available on fcpo.com. We have both the pre-cat and post-cat sensors. Always recommended to replace them in pairs if possible. Usually when one goes, the second one will follow. Now, the vehicle behind me happens to be my own vehicle. It is at 245,000 miles, somehow on the factory oxygen sensors, but every now and then I get a code for either system bank 1 or bank 2, too lean, or sometimes a multiple misfire code. And typically what that leads to is a failing or a bad oxygen sensor. If you have a fancy scanner, you can look at the live data and see if it's actually reading anything or not, which is something I've done over the years on this car. It's always haunted me a little bit, but now it's time to do them, and we're going to take you along for the ride. These can last you anywhere from 60 to 100,000 miles. Again, this is a weird example. This car was used to commute its whole life on the highway, quite literally, which is my guess as to why the oxygen sensors have made it this far. But nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and replace them, so don't be shocked if you see them fail earlier than that or last a little bit longer than that. Before we get started on this DIY though, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this DIY, we have a gear wrench, oxygen sensor wrench set. This is gear wrench 41720. This will come in handy. It uses a 22mm socket head to get the oxygen sensors out. Along with that, we have a regular 22mm wrench. And if we need it, but I'm hoping we don't, I have a custom one, which is basically cut in half, which I've done for other oxygen sensor DIYs. So hopefully you don't see that one come out. Otherwise, that means we're having a bad time. We have a couple extensions here for the 3/8 drive ratchet. We have a 1/4" drive ratchet with a small extension that we're going to use with an E8 Torx for our shield for the rear oxygen sensor. It's going to be a little bit tight, but I think we should be able to get to it. Some pliers in case we need them, some long reach ones. Sometimes these oxygen sensors will fight you, either coming out or going in. Just that the harness gets all twisted up, so that gives it a little bit of a better chance to get those turned around. We also have a 5mm hex for the beauty cover that has to come off, an 8mm socket, and the E8, of course. And not necessary, but nice to have, is an electric tool to get the splash shield hardware off. And don't forget your favorite penetrating fluid. Now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. My good people, we're going to start at the bottom of the E91 first. I think these are going to be the more annoying ones to do, so we will reward ourselves with the easier ones up top. We have 6 8mm screws holding in this back splash shield that we're going to remove. The area where these sensors are located is at the bottom of these manifolds, right above our subframe, but we should have enough room to work with. So 8mm socket on our small impact, we'll just zap these out. Be mindful, there can be a lot of debris up here. You don't want that falling into your eyes as you're working on the ground. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and set this to the side, and then we're gonna get a little bit cozy, talk about the oxygen sensors up in here. What's great about these is each one is different, whether the plug is different or the color of the wire sheathing is different. So it's pretty hard to mix them up. So if you were stressing about that like I was, I know we talked about it before, don't be. All right, so we have our 2 oxygen sensors, both bank 1 and bank 2. You can see one has a black sheathing, one has a gray sheathing, so it'll be really easy to keep these separate. I'm gonna try going between our oxygen sensor wrench and our 22mm, just standard wrench. We're gonna start by unplugging our left bank sensor first. We'll do one at a time just so we don't mix up the connectors. This bracket is a little bit worse for wear. There was a little tab holding this here that has rusted off over time. That's okay. I'm gonna disconnect these, just pull them apart. You can see this left bank has a green O-ring around the seal for the plug. Our new one has the same one, and it has the same black sheathing. So that's how we know which one is which. And then these cables are flexible. There's another tab, a metal one up here holding the sensor in place, just lift it up and out of the way. Again, this example is in rough shape, 250,000 miles, seen every single winter possible, so it's normal for it to look rough. And we also just did a massive oil pan gasket DIY. So if you see a little bit of oil on this cable, it's from that previous leak. So with that now, I'm just gonna pop the right bank out of its bracket, which again has also rusted off. So we can move that around and get that out of our way. That'll give us some room to feed this O2 sensor wrench up and over. This is probably the trickiest part of this whole job, is just getting these sockets to sit in. It's a little bit of a tight space to work with. Well, luckily the cables are flexible. That's just a metal heat shield sheathing on them, so you should be able to work around that. All right. We're gonna use an extension. This is a 3/8 extension with our 3/8 ratchet. Heck yeah. That's exactly what we want to see, my good people. It goes without saying, we have soaked these a few days ago while we were doing other work on the car with our favorite penetrating fluid. There's no way these would have come out probably otherwise. So take your time, pre-soak everything that you can. It will make your life a lot easier. I'm gonna pull this socket up out of our way so we can unthread this sensor and get it out. All right. We should be able just to twist it by hand now. The only thing that we're gonna be fighting here is the actual electrical connector. It's gonna wanna bind up on us, which is why we like unplugging them first as well. All right, and that is what a 250,000 mile oxygen sensor looks like. I don't think I've ever replaced one this old as far as mileage goes. Pretty impressive. We're just gonna get straight to business. Again, this is a left bank, black sheathing. The new oxygen sensors already have, and these typically come, despite of brand, with my friend Gareth Foley would say, some shmoo on the threads, some anti-seize. So no need to apply any additional. I'm gonna straighten out this cable a bit so that it doesn't fight me as I'm trying to thread it in. And actually, just to help myself, I'm gonna keep the cap on until I have it fed up over here. All right, so I'm not banging the sensor around on this rusty crud. Again, try not to touch the tip of the sensor, as I almost quite literally just did. And once you get that in place, make sure that the threads are engaging evenly, back it up a little bit if you need to, and then get it started by hand. And try to use the socket to thread it in, so I just can't get a good grip on it. So what I did now is I fed the cable up all the way to the side of the transmission, so that I'm hopefully not fighting it too much. So that's what I'm trying to twist here. I'm not even trying to fight the threads. I'm fighting the actual cable, not wanting to play along and cooperate. The extra metal sheathing, while very important, does not make it any easier. With that pretty much all the way in, now we can use our oxygen sensor socket to snug it up. Let me bring that back down here. I just jammed it up there. These oxygen sensors only get torqued down to 25 Newton meters. So if you're gonna use a torque wrench, make sure you have it at the right angle and 25 Newton meters as you set. Basically treat it like a drain plug. You're just wanting to crush the crush washer. They don't need to be that tight. If you're not using the oxygen sensor wrench, you can get to it with a regular 22 from the side, basically alongside the exhaust, and then you can just kind of dance with it back and forth. We have a couple cameras in the way to show you in full what that would look like, but here's what that wrench looks like at this angle. So definitely doable. You don't necessarily need that socket, but makes life easier if you have it. All right, that's gonna do us for this one. That should be nice and tight. We're gonna reroute our wiring, plug it back in, and then move on to bank 2. There goes the rest of that tab. We'll be using some zip ties to put this baby back together. These are keyed plugs. So you can see on the end of the new sensor, it's got a couple grooves cut into it. Two square ones on this side, a half circle or half moon on the other side. That's going to match your plug. So they do only go in one way. Plug that baby in. No real satisfying click on this plastic, but you get the idea, my good people. That can go in like that. That was tucked in over there. This can go up higher if we'd like. So the slack is over there. And originally that tab holding the sensor in place was somewhere here on the back side. It is no longer with us. So we'll be using the zip tie too to help keep our wires in check. But with that, now we can do bank 2. So same deal, we're just gonna pull to unplug. This thing is drenched in oil. And for this one, I think I'm gonna tackle it with the wrench. I can come straight from underneath. 22mm wrench, same thing. Here's our second sensor. Came out nicely. Let's get to it. Let's feed our new one in. Arguably, my good people, the hardest thing you're fighting down here is the freaking harness. You can cut it off on the old ones if you want, at least to make your removal a bit easier. It's not going to help you on the install, but it's a thought that's crossed my mind. You know, I'm just really hoping for the day we get Bluetooth oxygen sensors. And again, this one has the gray sheathing. It has a yellow sealing O-ring, just like the new one, same color. So again, pretty hard to mix up. Just cleaning out this connector with some electronic cleaner, as these things were drenched in oil. This is a receiving end. There we go, 25 Newton meters. These bad Johnnies right here were the move. All right, well, we're gonna pretend that our old tab that held this in place is still here. Again, it's no longer with us, RIP. It'd be like that sometimes. Same thing, these are also keyed. They only go in one way. No satisfying click, I know, I'm sorry, my good people. Here, we're gonna do this. We're gonna tuck that behind that, and then that, like that. We're just gonna snake these up. Something like this. Okay. All right, we're gonna get a couple zip ties, join these two together, and then we're gonna throw our shield back on and move up top. And now we're just gonna put our shield back in, my good people. No problem. Again, 6 8mm bolts. All right, my good people, with that, let's hop up in the engine bay and do our pre-cat sensors now. All right, my good people, on top of things here, we do have to remove the cowl so we can get our beauty cover off to get to the connectors for the oxygen sensor. I know, I'm sorry, it's not my idea, but we have to do it. You've seen us do this before. We have 6 8mm bolts that hold on our cabin air filter, 2 that hold on the cowl, a couple panels. Let's get this thing off. Go ahead and set this to the side. This is also a great time to inspect your cabin air filter. Pull it out, check it out, see if it's bad. Every year or every 15 to 20,000 miles, it's when you want to do it. From there, we have an 8mm bolt, one on either side of the cowl. But before we get to those, we have 2 electrical connectors, one on that side, one on this side. One's for the hood sensor. Just press the tab, pull it back. And then there's some alligator clips that hold it in place. We're just gonna swing these over to the front of the car. And we have a little plastic panel, one on either side. There is also a rubber tee that goes into it that stays on the car. Those channel into this V here, pop those off. We'll do the same thing on the other side. In this case, this sensor no longer locks into the cowl, so we're gonna pull it with everything. Alligator clip comes up, pull that over. Here's that little rubber T tab on either side. We have one more rubber T here. Pop that one back. Here's our 8mm bolt that we're going to zap out. And we have one more on the other side as well. And the rubber T in the back. And now we can pull this panel out. Before we get to that, my good people, let's not get crazy. We gotta pull this power cable going through it out first. Just a couple clips. Pull it forward. We can lift this up. We have another cable going through here. 3 of these tabs, each one has 2 clips. Just pop those forward with your fingers. You use a small flathead screwdriver or pick if you need to as well. No shame in that. Pull that cable out. Lift and pull forward. Set this to the side. With that out of the way, now we can remove the beauty cover, which is held in by 3 5mm hex bolts. We have 2 in the front, 1 in the back. Now we can go ahead, lift this up, mindful of your expansion tank hose there. You don't want to rip that open. And by pulling this beauty cover off, we expose the oxygen sensor connectors, pretty much the same style that you've seen since the E36. They just clip them right above the fuel rail. So we'll start with the first one, which is going to be the black one. Pop this baby up, 1 small tab, push that to release, and then we can just follow this cable all the way back. Goes behind the valve cover. And we're going to do one at a time, just like we did at the bottom. And then pull that down under. There should be a little metal clip, yes, which came with our cable. We'll show you that in just a moment. These keep the oxygen sensor cables from dancing around on the cylinder head or on the exhaust. Looks like these, they're just clipped to this metal shield at the bottom of the head. We'll show you how to get those back on once we're done. This is also a great time to inspect your ground cable up here. This one has been replaced, but typically these turn blue and then they start to fray and they pop, which is going to give you a bad time. So if you see that now, go ahead and replace it while you're in here. I'm going to take this off as we're going to reuse that later. Save that. We have one more here, which is also come off with our cable, but that clips it to the bottom of where that ground strap bolts to that shield. So we'll throw this back on as well. And there's our oxygen sensor. We're going to get our wrench in there. We're going to use the specialty one with an extension. We're just going to get our socket down here. That should work in our favor, I believe. If we need to get a longer extension, we can. I brought 2 out. We have a 6 and a 3. I believe that equals 9 inches. Put it in the off position. Oh yeah, no problem. Oh, yeah, we were too rough. That's what I get. I bumped into my expansion tank hose and now I've upset it. Then with that, we can twist these out. Again, we sprayed these with penetrating fluid a few days prior. Definitely makes life a little bit easier, especially on an older car, high mileage car, and if they're original. Here we go, my good people. 250,000 miles later, not bad. All right, let's not frolic here. Let's get the new one in. All right, we got our new one. Again, already anti-seized on the threads from Bosch. Very kind of them to do so. This harness is new, so it's gonna wanna fight us a bit. So we're just gonna keep twisting the cable in the direction that we want our new sensor to go. And it's basically installing it for us. And it has bottomed it out. How kind. We'll take our special oxygen sensor socket, get this fed down there. This time we're not gonna bash our expansion tank hose line, as we've learned. All right, do one more just for insurance. Wonderful. Now with that, we're just gonna route the cable once we straighten it back out. And we'll send this puppy around the back. But before I do that, I think I'm gonna wait. We're gonna do the back sensor first, and then we're gonna route the cables together. So with that, this one's gonna be a little bit tighter. It sits under here, underneath that shield. so we can't really see it, but we should be able to get our specialty socket on it. So with that, let's go ahead and unplug it up here. It's easy to remember, the black one went up front, the gray one came down below, underneath our harness. We have two E8 screws holding this heat shield in place above our secondary oxygen sensor. I apologize for the view. This first one's going to be a little bit hard to see, but it's right beneath the nut for the ground strap. So we have our E8 on our 1/4" extension. Just going to work that one out. I'm going to leave the ground strap on the heat shield here so it can kind of just hang off to the side, and it forces me to put this back on. Now we'll get to the rearward one. That's fine. We gotta fish for that other bolt, so we're just gonna drop our tool down there for now. Carl, hang on to that for us. This heat shield can come out, and now we have a nice, clear as day view of our oxygen sensor. All right, with the shield off, we sprayed some penetrating fluid on our oxygen sensor so that hopefully this one doesn't fight us coming out. And get our socket on. We're using a shorty 3/8 drive ratchet for this one. See if we can get a good bite, because we don't really have too much room to work with, unfortunately. Oh, that shield that I said I wasn't going to take off. Yeah, I lied when I said that the top was going to be a reward. The top is a punishment. The bottom was a pleasure compared to these. They're just tight. I have big hands. We don't have a lot of room to work with, but it's out. Let's get this new one in and button up this DIY. We have our new one, my good people. We're going to feed this sucker down. Get it going into oxygen sensor town. You know what I mean? I'm going to double check it with the big setup here just to make sure we have it nice and snug. I know it's not a lot of torque, but sometimes these things can get pesky, and the last thing I want is oxygen or an exhaust leak. So this will ensure us from having to come back to this. Don't use any of that, what I just said. All right, with that one installed, now we can reinstall our heat shield. So we'll grab our two E8 Torx bolts and get that one installed. Then we'll route our harnesses and get them plugged in. All right, we're gonna feed our heat shield back on that I reluctantly left bolted to the ground strap. Be a better person than me, my good people. Grab a 10mm socket, wrench, whatever you have. Get that strap off. It'll make your life just a little bit easier. However, you don't need to get a camera in here, so maybe you'll be fine with it in place. It was in the way of our GoPro for a bit, so that's why I was regretting leaving it on. Just gonna untangle it, make sure it's nice and straight. With the back one started, that can hold our bracket somewhat in place. We can get this forward one started as well. This is not fun when you can't see what you're doing, but once you get one started, they'll line up the bracket for the other one. All right, we have both E8 started. Mark was so kind to get his hands in here for this front one, which you think it would have been easier for me and him for the back one, but instead we had it reversed. But that's okay. We're just gonna go ahead and get that sunk in, 1/4" ratchet. We're just gonna gently snug these in. No more than 8 to 10 Newton meters worth of force. They're a very tiny bolt, just holding on a little heat shield and our ground strap. We're gonna route this gray one in first. That fed up over there. You can see this metal clip here at the back of the cylinder head valve cover where my index finger is. That is going to hold, help hold these wires in place, similar to the ones that came off with the black cable earlier. Tuck that in there. And we're going to feed this connector under our PCV hose, just like we took it out. Plug this bad boy in. Oh yeah, tuck it in. No problem, my good people, no problem. With that in place, let's do the same thing for the black cable. All right, we have a metal clip that came off. That one can go back on. We had one more of those metal clips coming off of our shield here. That should look something like that. We gotta route it underneath the PCV hose just like we did previously with the gray one. That's how they came out. Then we can bring it on over. Come on over. Come on over, baby. I'm gonna tuck these here on the injector rail, like so. We have one more clip under here as well. That will hold that in. We should have an upslide from the gray one to get that one in there too. Come on, don't be shy. Plug this sucker in. And wind it a little bit. It's a little tangled up. Plug that thing in. Voila. Let's get our beauty cover back on. 3.5mm hex. Go from there. For our beauty cover, send this thing back in. Be mindful of your coolant expansion. Your expansion tank coolant hose. We already put that under quite some stress today. We don't want to give it much more. 2 5mm hex up front, one in the back. Snug those up. Now we can get our cowl back over. This has two little tabs on the back. One right here, a second one over here. There was a third one here, man, maybe 4 and 5. You get the idea, it's old. But this is gonna clip in and bite up against this bottom seal on the bottom of the cowl. Go ahead and get this sort of lined up, looking at where the 8mm bolts go. Once it looks kind of proper, we can force it on, or not force it on, but feed it on. We can also go ahead and clip in this electrical harness in here while we have some play. Just like so. Then we can get our two 8mm bolts, one on either end. Now we can install our cabin air filter once more, held in by 6 8mm screws. We can reclip this front power cable. And we have 2 panels, one on either side. Route this sensor back over, or the connector, depending on what you took off. Alligator clips, plug it back in. Stay put, please, thank you. Same thing on the other side. Route our sensor back over. Imagine this would click in there, if it still did. All right. And with that, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Sorry for misleading you at the beginning. Again, this top inward oxygen sensor was a real pain in the butt compared to the rest. Overall, really not a hard job. I highly recommend penetrating the threads with some penetrating fluid of your choice before you even attempt this job, especially on a higher mileage vehicle like this one. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.